He's gone. Next question. Was it easy or difficult to work with him? I think everybody, from what I've just said, it should be quite clear just how much respect, love, veneration I have for this man. But I have to say, he was a difficult man. His family said this. Everybody who's ever had any close contact with him all would agree. He's not an easy man to live with. He's not an easy man to work with. He could be feisty, irritable, abrasive, rude. I mean, any any sort of personality trait that irritates you, he could be any or all of them at once. But behind all this, there was this absolutely massive fire of jnana, I think is probably a good way of describing it. People who came into his presence, people he looked at, people he dealt with. This fire was so strong, he'd ignite it in the people who came to see him. I think that was his role, that was his function, and he did it very, very well throughout his whole life. I talked to his daughter, Shivani, because, and this is an interesting point, I asked Papaji once, when did you start being a guru? Thinking he would say late 1940s, some point after he left Ramanashram, possibly after he left Pakistan, and when he went back to Lucknow. And he surprised me by saying when I was 8 years old. And I thought, no, that's not possible. He said, no, I used to give lectures on the Buddha's teachings in the town square of Lyallpur when I was a child. People would come to me, even when I was a child, they'd come to my house seeking advice. He said, I don't know how they came, why they came, but he said, wherever I've been, it's been my destiny that people will come. I don't have to go looking for these people. I can't hide. This is one lesson I've learned in my life. I can't hide because people who have a destiny to meet with truth and experience it somehow cross my path, and there's a script that the universe runs on, that at various points these people have to bump into me. He said there's no point me trying to hide, because I know I've got all these scheduled meetings, and wherever I run to, wherever I hide, I'm going to find these people who need me in that moment, and something will happen. So then I talked to Shivani, who was born, I think, early mid-1930s. Next time she came to visit, I said, when did Papaji start giving satsangs? He told me he started being a guru when he was 8 years old. Is that really? Or is he exaggerating a bit? And she said, my memories go back to about 1940. So this was before he even came to see Bhagavan. And we used to move around a lot. He had different jobs. We lived in different places. And she said, the one thing that I always remember is that wherever we went, within 1 or 2 days, people would be coming to the house. And it didn't matter whether we closed the gate, locked the door, somehow they'd get in. She said people were climbing in through the windows to get at him. Even in 1940, we would go to a new place. We didn't know anybody in that town, and within a week, she said, people would be climbing in the windows trying to get to him. He had something. People knew he had that something, and locked doors didn't keep them away. They had to get to him. And just while we're talking about this, there's another, one of his old devotees who knew him well in the 70s, 80s, when he used to spend a lot of time in Hardwar, Rishikesh, just walking up and down the Ganga. He would say, let's go out for a walk. And so the two of them would just walk along the banks of the Ganga. No, they'd pick a destination. They'd say, let's go to such and such restaurant in town. So they would start walking, and then perhaps within 10 or 15 minutes, for no reason at all, Papaji would turn left or he'd turn right and start walking in a different direction. And this friend of mine would say, where are we going? And Papaji would say, I don't know. Why have you turned left here? I don't know. I had to turn left here. I have to go this way. Don't ask me to explain. Something is making me walk this way now. So they would walk 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. And then, often in the middle of nowhere, they'd see some man, he'd be sitting by the side of the road, or he might be in a restaurant. And Papaji would recognize that this was the meeting that he was scheduled to have that day. And that although in the morning he might have decided, I will go along this road to this restaurant, halfway along that road, the power of the self would make him turn left, make him walk 3 kilometers in different direction, because that power knew that he was needed at a particular point with a particular man, and that some kind of guru-disciple exchange had to happen. And this friend of mine said this happened regularly. He would always accept it. He said, I trust the power that makes me do these things. When I suddenly find myself turn 90 degrees and head off into the mountains or wherever, I never think to myself, I'm going for lunch, I shouldn't be doing this, or why am I going up that mountain? He said, I've lived my life in that silence. I trust that silence. When that silence turns my body 90 degrees and makes it walk in a different direction, he said, there's not even an I who accepts the decision. You just know that you have to walk in that direction because something on that route has to happen that day. So if you walk, you'll meet that person, they'll have some major experience, and then often he'll walk away. This is another really bizarre aspect of his teaching, that throughout his whole life he would have seemingly random meetings with people who are ready for a direct experience of the self. He would meet them in out-of-the-way places, by the side of the road, in the mountains. They would talk for a little bit. There would be some transmission. They would wake up. And then of course the person would say, who are you? Where are you from? Can I come and see you? What's your address? Where do you live? Please be my guru. I want to serve you for the rest of my life. And Papaji would say no. He wouldn't give his name. He wouldn't give his address. Wouldn't give any information. His business was finished. He would go. He would give somebody a waking up experience, and then he would walk out of their lives as a complete stranger. I mean, this happened to Meera on the banks of the Ganga. She had this absolutely amazing first encounter with Papaji, and then he just left. Didn't say who he was, didn't say if or when he was coming back. But she had the determination, I must see this man again. So the only fact that she knew about this man was that sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning he walked on a particular stretch of the river. Because when at their first meeting, he said, if you want to see me, come and see me at this time on this particular stretch of the river, because I'm sometimes there in the morning. That was the only fact she knew about his whole life, was that very occasionally he was on that stretch of the river. So she sat there for 8 months, every single day, through a very, very cold North Indian winter. She had one dress. She meditated under a tree for 8 months. She refused to move, because the only thing she knew about this man was that he was sometimes by the river in that spot. And then 8 months later he came back, and she got together with him again and finally found out a bit more about him. But this was standard. People would their thirst for an experience would somehow bring Papaji into their lives. They would have a really massive experience, and he would just walk out of their lives again. For a long, long time, most of his devotees never knew where he was at any given moment. You couldn't get in touch with him, you couldn't go and see him. He would announce that he was coming to your town sometimes, and then he would see you. He lived a very peripatetic, means wandered around a lot, and he decided where he was going to go. And if he thought, I'll go to this town this week, then he would tell people in the bench, you can come and see me this week. Otherwise he was very, very inaccessible. And when he met new people, he would sometimes take their address in his address book, but he'd never ever say, I come from Lucknow and my address is such and such. So people were just left wondering. And when I started writing, nothing ever happened. I needed to collect as much information about him as possible. So one of the primary sources was his old address books, because when he had had a good meeting with someone, often he would take down their address in his address book, but he would never give out his address. So if he felt like it, he would write to this person, give them some more teaching or advice. But people didn't know how to get in touch with him. So I copied down 20 years of old addresses, all scrawled in his old books, and I sent a letter off to every single person whose name is in these books, saying, I'm writing this book, it's an authorized biography. Papaji is encouraging everyone who has been associated with him to tell their stories. What's your story? Why is your name in this book? And so many people wrote to me saying, oh, I met him 20 years ago for 10 minutes. Where is he? I want to come and say thank you. These were people who just had one chance meeting, and he completely went out of their lives. And when I showed these letters to him, most of them he couldn't even remember. These things were just happening. It was like an assembly line, a production line. All his life he was just bumping into people, waking them up, walking out of their lives, and there was like a blank in his head. It wasn't even registering with him. My favourite, he went to South America in 1975. There were some Venezuelan addresses in his address book, so that they were included in the mailing. I wrote to everyone in Venezuela, and one man just sent me a letter back that said, Dear Mr. Godman, please tell Punjaji, that's what he was called in those days, please tell Punjaji that he didn't waste his time in Venezuela. I went to see him once, and I've been happy every day for the rest of my life. Just tell him thank you. This is for me the essence of Papaji's teaching life, his career. He would just mysteriously appear in your life, give you, if you were lucky, a massive direct experience of the self, which may or may not stick, but somehow he made you happy. That was a key thing with him. He said, my teaching isn't about suffering and what you do about it. My teaching is suffering doesn't exist, bondage doesn't exist, your inherent nature is happiness, you're willfully avoiding an awareness of that happiness by pointing in the wrong direction. So one side effect of these experiences that people had in his presence was they suddenly discovered not that they were having happiness as an experience, but that happiness was their nature. They were naturally, spontaneously happy, and that whatever Papaji was taking away from you was the experiencer or the veiling that made you think you had to do something to get happy. So once he stripped that away, what was left was happiness itself. And people, many times, they just write to me and say, he made me happy. They couldn't talk philosophy, they couldn't articulate this in any religious context, but they just said, when I was with him, he made me happy, and when I went away, I was happy. And I don't know, the people who are watching this film, if you get them to look at some of the old videos, the early 1990s videos, 92, 93, or even the old audio tapes, the most common noise is laughter. Somehow in his presence, people's minds became so tenuous, so almost non-existent, and it was such a relief that people were just giggling all the time. It irritated me, because the first Papaji video I watched, the first tape I listened to, Papaji would say something very mundane, like, it's 10:30, I have to go soon, and everybody would burst into laughing. They'd think this was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with these people? Why are they laughing because Papaji says it's 10:30? And then slowly I realised that even when you weren't having the big, the Big Bang experience, I'm enlightened, I'm free, there was a kind of continuous undercurrent of peace, happiness, joy, just by being there. You hadn't done anything, you just sat there, looked at him, listened to him, and you're in such a state of thoughtlessness that everything anybody did, anything anybody said, was just hilarious. That you look at the camera, sometimes the camera will turn to the audience, and you'll just look at 150 people, and it's the happiest group of faces you'll ever see in your whole life. There was something about that man that it wasn't that he was communicating happiness, he was inherently abiding in that state of happiness, and by abiding in that state, if you sat in front of him, he could somehow communicate to that happiness that was inside you, this is who you really are, stop wasting your time being miserable, being a sufferer, having all these experiences, just stop paying attention to the mind, to your past, to your thoughts. Just be as you are in that moment, and you'll find that your happiness as well.